When someone disrespects you, it usually isn't random. It happens because they believe you'll stay no matter what. They believe you'll still answer the phone, still reply to messages, still show up like nothing happened. In their mind, your attachment is stronger than your boundaries, so they feel safe pushing limits. They assume you won't leave. A man who understands his worth doesn't try to correct that belief with arguments. He doesn't explain why the behavior hurt him or negotiate for better treatment. The moment he sees clear disrespect, he understands something important: the other person has already decided how much they value him. And no amount of talking will change that decision in the moment. So instead of reacting emotionally, he chooses distance. He steps away quietly and completely. Not to teach a lesson, not to get a reaction, and not to create drama. He leaves because staying would mean accepting behavior that goes against his self-respect. He doesn't ask for closure because he doesn't need permission to walk away from something that no longer feels right. What makes this powerful is that it isn't loud. There's no final speech, no angry message, no long explanation. There's just absence. The calls stop being answered. The messages go unread. The access she once had to his time, attention, and emotional energy is gone. And that absence creates a silence she wasn't expecting, because she had built her behavior on the assumption that he would always be there. While she's left trying to understand what happened, he's focused elsewhere. He puts his energy into his work, his health, his discipline, and his growth. He doesn't sit around hoping for an apology or waiting for regret. He accepts that respect isn't something you chase, it's something you require by the way you live. Over time, something shifts. The man who once felt overlooked becomes grounded. He moves differently. He speaks less but stands firmer. He no longer needs validation because his standards are clear to him. And whether she regrets her actions or not no longer matters, because she no longer has access to him. That's the real transformation. Not winning someone back. Not proving anything. But becoming someone who doesn't tolerate being treated poorly in the first place. When you stop explaining your worth and start living it, disrespect loses its power. And the peace that comes from that choice belongs entirely to you. When you disappear without warning, the silence hits harder than any argument ever could. She suddenly feels the absence of something she assumed would always be there. And that absence is uncomfortable. It forces her to replay the past days and weeks in her mind, going over messages and conversations, trying to pinpoint the moment things changed. She starts asking herself what she said, what she did, and when exactly you stopped being available. That confusion is often where regret begins. Most men ruin this moment by making a big announcement. They give speeches about how they won't tolerate disrespect, how they're done, how they're walking away for good. But by doing that, they give away their emotional energy. They show that they still care enough to explain, to argue, to prove a point. And that reassurance softens the impact of their absence. When you cut off access quietly, there is no scene. No final message. No emotional release. There's just space and silence. And in that silence, she realizes she no longer has access to your time, your attention, or your presence, things she may have taken for granted. This only works if it's done completely. You don't leave one door open just in case. You don't keep watching her social media, liking her posts, or checking to see what she's doing. Every small signal keeps you connected and weakens the boundary you're trying to set. True separation means removing her number, muting or blocking her online. And not engaging with her in shared spaces. And you do all of this quietly, without trying to get a reaction or make her jealous. The man who truly walks away isn't performing for her. He isn't waiting to see if she notices. He's simply accepting that disrespect has consequences, and one of those consequences is losing access to him. He doesn't need words to make that clear. The absence speaks for itself. This is where discipline matters most. There will be moments when you want to check if she's reached out or if she's noticed you're gone. But you resist, because you understand that any attention you give, even curiosity, keeps her present in your mind. And the real goal isn't just removing her from your life, but removing her from your thoughts. The best way to do that is to fill the empty space immediately. You train your body. You focus on your work. You learn new skills. You spend time with new people. Because if you cut off contact but sit alone thinking about her, she hasn't really lost access to you. She's just moved from your phone into your head. When this is done right, you move forward quickly. By the time she fully feels your absence, you're already building a better version of your life. Not to impress her, not to win her back, but because that growth is now your priority. And even if she tried to reconnect, she would no longer fit into the life you're creating. The real power in this isn't making someone regret losing you. It's becoming someone who wouldn't tolerate that situation again. Once a man learns that he doesn't need to explain himself to walk away from disrespect, everything changes. His relationships change. His confidence changes. Even the way people treat him changes. And once that lesson sinks in, he stops needing permission, validation, or closure. He simply moves on and doesn't look back. Imagine having a guide that doesn't just tell you what to think, but shows you exactly what to do, step by step. When you walk away from a woman who disrespected you, the worst thing you can do is stop moving. Sitting around angry, replaying old conversations, or watching her life from a distance only keeps you stuck. And honestly, that's what she expects. She assumes you'll be focused on her while your own life goes nowhere. The man who handles this differently understands something important. The strongest form of closure isn't a conversation. It's growth. It's becoming so focused on your own progress that months later, you barely resemble the person she knew. And the key is to do it quietly. You don't announce your plans. You don't post every workout or talk about every move you're making. The moment you start trying to show your progress, you've turned it into a performance. Quiet progress protects your focus and keeps outside opinions from slowing you down. Silence gives you space to grow. While nothing seems to be happening on the surface, you're building something real underneath. And when people eventually notice, the difference between who you are now and who you were before is obvious. This change has to touch every part of your life. Your health. Your money. Your mindset. Your appearance. Your social circle. If only one area improves, it's easy to dismiss. But when everything improves together, it's impossible to ignore. The point isn't to make her regret losing you. The point is to become someone who no longer attracts that kind of disrespect. That takes discipline. It means waking up earlier than you want to, training harder than feels comfortable, learning things you used to avoid, and saying no to distractions that used to run your life. When this becomes your lifestyle, not a phase, your life starts reflecting a higher standard. And if she ever feels regret, it's not just about losing you. It's about realizing she completely misjudged you. You don't need to block her for attention. You don't need to talk about her to mutual friends. And if you ever cross paths, you don't need to prove anything. The change in you speaks for itself. The men who truly improve quietly aren't doing it in hopes that someone notices. They do it because they've accepted that their life is bigger than any one person's opinion. And ironically, that's what makes people pay attention. Eventually, she sees that her disrespect didn't slow you down. If anything, it pushed you forward. And in that moment, the power dynamic changes for good. You realize what you already knew when you walked away: you never needed her approval to win. You just needed the discipline to focus on yourself. Another shift happens when you stop explaining yourself. The moment you stop justifying your choices is the moment you take control back. Every time you explain your boundaries to someone who already disrespects you, you aren't being clear, you're asking for permission. When it comes to a woman who crossed your boundaries, explanations only give her room to argue, minimize what she did, or convince you that you're asking for too much. That's why men who value themselves let their actions speak. A man who knows where he's going doesn't need approval. When you pull back, change direction, or move on, she may try to start a conversation that sounds innocent but is really about pulling you back into her influence. Most men fall for this because they think explaining will fix things. It won't. She doesn't need an explanation. She needs to experience the change. That's what your actions are for. Explaining yourself keeps you tied to her opinion. It keeps you reacting instead of leading. So when she asks why you're distant or why you stopped reaching out, you don't write a long message. You simply say you've been focused on your own path, and you leave it at that. Someone who respects you won't demand reasons for your boundaries. And if you struggle with this, practice it everywhere. You don't need to justify your routine, your goals, or your choices. Let your results speak. The right people will understand without an explanation. If someone doesn't respect you, no explanation will suddenly make them change their mind. In relationships, this matters even more because people are naturally drawn to those who move with confidence and certainty, not those who need approval before making decisions. When you stop explaining yourself, you start sending a clear message. You trust your own judgment more than you care about someone else's reaction. And surprisingly, this often brings more respect, even from people who once dismissed you. They see that you're not someone they can control with guilt, pressure, or emotional tactics. For the woman who disrespected you, your silence becomes more powerful than any speech. It shows that you're not angry or trying to prove a point. You've simply decided she's no longer part of your life. You're no longer trying to make her understand, you've moved on. And when you live like this consistently, you stop seeking validation from the wrong people and start building a life that doesn't need defending. You begin to realize how much power you gave away every time you try to make someone see your side, and you decide not to do that again. A man who moves without explanation understands that his time and energy are too valuable to spend convincing someone who never truly valued them in the first place. After you walk away from someone who disrespected you, what you do next matters just as much as leaving. Many men think walking away is the win, but if you walk away into an empty life, with no higher goals, no stronger influences, and no better environment, you haven't really moved forward. You've just removed one problem and made room for another. This is where changing your circle becomes important. The people you spend time with shape your habits, your mindset, and your standards more than motivation ever will. If you stay around people who think small, settle for less, or live for distractions, their influence will slowly pull you back down, no matter how much you talk about growth or self-respect. That's why many men return to the same situations they left. Not because they miss the person, but because they miss the familiarity. They never replaced it with something better, so their mind goes back to what it knows. A man who truly values himself understands that cutting someone off is only the first step. The next step is surrounding himself with people who don't tolerate disrespect at all. People who focus on building, improving, and holding each other accountable. This isn't about finding people to complain with. It's about putting yourself in environments that push you to grow. Places where your excuses don't make sense anymore. Where progress is expected, not optional. Where comfort is challenged, and effort is normal. When you live this way, your focus shifts. Instead of wondering what she's thinking or feeling, your mind is busy with goals, your work, your fitness, your skills, your future. And something else happens. The people you left behind notice the change. They see that you're no longer in the same spaces, having the same conversations, or living the same patterns. For the woman who once had access to you, this hits hard, not because you're trying to hurt her, but because she realizes you've moved into a life she no longer fits into. She sees you surrounded by people who value you. And at that point, the distance between who you were and who you've become is impossible to ignore. People respect you not because they want something from you, but because your presence fits with the kind of life they're building. Most women don't regret losing a man just because he leaves. That kind of life doesn't happen by accident. You create it by choosing to be around people who are already operating at a higher level. That means taking an honest look at your circle and cutting out the people who drain you, distract you, or keep you stuck. It also means putting yourself in places that feel uncomfortable at first, because discomfort is often a sign of growth. You start investing your energy into the right people the same way you once invested it into chasing validation. The difference is that with the right people, your energy multiplies instead of being wasted. Over time, you stop thinking about proving anything to the woman who disrespected you. The life you're building makes her opinion, her presence, and even her memory irrelevant. And if she feels regret, it's not because you told her what she lost. It's because she can see you living in a world she was never meant to be part of. Another powerful shift is learning to show no emotional reaction when you're disrespected. When someone who once acted like they cared about you crosses a line, the natural response is to show your hurt or anger. You want them to see the impact of what they did. You want them to understand. But showing that emotional reaction doesn't earn respect. It gives away control. It tells the other person they still have power over how you feel. As long as they can provoke you, they still have a piece of you. The strongest response isn't coldness or pretending you don't care. It's calm steadiness. It's refusing to let someone pull your emotions around. Not because you're hiding your feelings, but because you've decided they don't get access to them anymore. This kind of self-control is rare. It requires you to pause instead of reacting, to stay grounded instead of firing back. You don't raise your voice. You don't insult. You don't try to win an argument. You simply don't engage. That silence sends a clear message: you have no control here. People who thrive on drama hate this because they rely on emotional reactions to feel powerful. When you don't give them that, they have nothing to work with. And for the woman who once believed she could disrespect you and still keep your attention, it hits hard when she realizes she can't even get a reaction out of you. This ability doesn't just change your relationships. It carries into business, family situations, and any moment where someone tries to manipulate you emotionally. The less you react, the more control you have. People can't play games with someone who refuses to play. You build this skill by slowing down. By pausing before you speak. By controlling your breathing when emotions rise. By focusing on where you're going instead of how you feel in the moment. Over time, people learn that trying to get under your skin is pointless. For the woman who disrespected you, that lesson stays with her. Not because you argued or lashed out, but because you left without giving her anything emotional to hold onto. No anger. No bitterness. Just absence. And that kind of exit is hard to forget. If there's one thing to understand, it's this: life will keep testing your boundaries until you decide to enforce them. Until you stop giving second chances to people who wouldn't give you one. Until you draw a line and mean it. When you do that, you stop handing your power away. And once you learn that lesson, you don't forget it.